It's going to be one of the toughest jobs once U.S. troops withdraw from Afghanistan later this year. Securing and operating Kabul airport, Afghanistan's main gateway to the outside world, will probably be left to Turkey. Being NATO's only Muslim member and Ankara's close ties to the Afghan government made it the ideal choice. But the risks are also weighing heavily on Ankara. The Taliban has declared it will see Turkey no different than the Americans who they fought for 2 decades. Despite the tough job ahead, Turkey's mission could also help repair its relations with the U.S., which suffered over a series of disagreements. In an address from the White House, U.S. President Joe Biden defended the withdrawal of U.S. troops, saying America's goals had been accomplished. He pushed back strongly against concerns that the Taliban would take over Afghanistan despite its recent gains across the country.
The Afghan troops have 300,000 well-equipped as any army in the world, and an air force against something like 75,000 Taliban. It is not inevitable.
So, will Turkish forces be able to secure an airport that has been a frequent target for Taliban fighters? And how will the mission affect its ties with other countries like Iran and particularly Russia, which has opposed NATO's presence in the region? And to break down what Turkey's airport mission could mean, joining me now from Istanbul is Murat Aslan. He's a security researcher at SETA, and from Kabul, Zalmai Nishat. He is a researcher at the Afghanistan Institute of Strategic Studies. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. Murat, how risky is this mission, and what are the challenges lie ahead for Turkish troops?
Well, it depends on to what extent Turkish military will assume a role in Kabul. If it's to protect the airport, it's an isolated place surrounded by a series of mountains and urban, and it may be a risk. And if Taliban captures Kabul, yes, it will be a bit risky and problematic. But if there's a compromise between the Afghani factions, well, it may be a sustainable mission. On the other hand, we know that Afghan national forces has a capacity for the last 20 years and may protect Kabul for any type of attack. We will see the developments, and later then we should, assess it.
Okay, but Zalmai, the Taliban said Turkey will be considered no different than the US or other NATO allies. What does that mean, and does this make Turkey a direct target for Taliban?
There might be some internet issues here in Kabul, but if there is any issue, my apologies beforehand. If I have understood your question right, it's about the Taliban's rejection of Turkey playing any role in post-NATO and US troops withdrawal. Their argument is that they see the Turkish troops as part of the NATO, and they have said that they would rather all NATO-related troops withdraw from Afghanistan. Also, they have a criticism of Turkish role in Afghanistan. They have argued that Turkey has traditional strong relation with the ethnic Uzbek and Turkmen, especially with their with Dostum. General Dostum, there's a bad blood between the Taliban and General Dostum. Goes back in 1990s, and especially when the Taliban were defeated in 2001. It is very famous that a lot of Taliban were rounded up in Kunduz province in north of Afghanistan, that thousands of them perished. This also kind of, harks back to that era as well.
Yes. So, Murat, apart from the risks, what's the significance of Turkey carrying out such a mission outside of NATO?
There's a historical engagement of Turkey to Afghanistan. Starting from 1920s and 30s, Turkey has always assisted Afghans because of historical roots. If you tell Mevlana or Nasreddin Hoca in Afghanistan, they will have the same rumors, the same beliefs, and also the same characteristics in terms of public features. On the other hand, this mission will take this relation a step further with challenges. Afghan public, maybe we can tell as the root of the problem, I think, Afghan public will demand, not request, but demand a Turkish presence to counter Taliban. Because public is really scared of having Taliban reigning the same with the same methodology they had applied before. On the other hand, Taliban will be more aggressive because their argument is to build a type of emirates with no constitution imposed by the United States or international community, and they want to build a type of country that's strictly under the control of themselves. So Turkey is in between, assisting the Afghan public and also countering the Taliban arguments. So it's a kind of question mark which part of this equilibrium will be dominant.
Okay, so what's your take on that, Zalmai? I mean, is Turkey in a position to strike a balance between the Taliban, which is comprised of, as we've mentioned, of various ethnic groups, and the government?
Let me answer that question in a way to also comment on the question. Taliban might be made up of some elements from different ethnic groups, but they are predominantly Pashtun movement. So they basically were raised in the 1990s from the south of Afghanistan, and they remained an exclusive, almost exclusive group in the 1990s made up of Pashtuns. Recently, we have elements of Uzbek, Tajiks, and other ethnic groups in their ranks, but they're mostly Pashtuns. Turkey has historical ties with Pakistan, which has a great deal of influence on the Taliban. Also, Turkey has a strategic relations with Qatar, where the peace talks are at the moment ongoing since the February 2020 negotiation between, which ended with the U.S. Negotiated a settlement with the Taliban. So through Qataris and through Pakistanis, Turkey can influence the Taliban to some extent, I guess.
So, Murat, what does the messy handover of Bagram Air Base tell us about the U.S.'s Afghan policies? And now that the U.S. troops are withdrawing, does that mean that the war in Afghanistan is over?
Well, Bagram Air Base represents the U.S. air power in Afghanistan. They were able to reach every corner of Afghanistan. So after withdrawing all troops back from Bagram Air Base, now there is no solid U.S. support to Afghan military or Afghan police on the ground. So it reminds something to Afghan people that they are not protected anymore, but they should manage the situation by themselves. On the other hand, the words of Biden yesterday, it was devastating because he was more focused on the loss of American soldiers or not the Afghans. So it tells something to Afghan people. That means they should not rely on a superpower for another 20 years, but they should do something by themselves. So we will see if Afghan forces will be capable of responding to Taliban threat. If they achieve it, I think Afghanistan will have a more healthy state-building effort afterwards.
Yes, Zalmai, would you agree that? And will the Afghan government, as Murat just mentioned, be able to survive now that the U.S. will, if I'm not mistaken, no longer provide air support to the regular Afghan forces?
The United States is not providing any air support after 11th of September this year, but they have promised to Afghanistan's ANDSF that they will provide equipment and training. They are working out how to do that, but also they have promised to help Afghanistan's nascent air force as well. So in terms of the government of Afghanistan, I think it is much to do with issues of politics, internal politics. It's very important to draw and to understand that the population of Afghanistan, the Taliban are not very popular inside Afghanistan. There has been a lot of surveys in Afghanistan in the past 3-4 years, and consistently the surveys show that they might have 13 to 14% supporters within Afghanistan, but they have a military power which is sustained by foreign support, and they have basically support infrastructure. Their leadership headquarters and their strategic depth is in our neighboring country. So that's why they have this, not having popular support inside. They have that. But the government of Afghanistan suffers from legitimacy because of these vote riggings, because of these corruptions, and not being able to create an inclusive government in the center. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people fall in huge people fall in between the Taliban and the current state. So, but they are supporting the republic in one way or another, and they demand reforms, basically.
Okay. Because nowadays, as we see from the Taliban officials, they are trying to polish their image. So, Murat, what would Afghanistan look like if it gets full under Taliban control, and what would be the political fallout for regional countries?
I think we should understand the internal dynamics. Afghanistan is a multi-ethnic country with many languages, and in the meantime, there are some hot issues in concern, like illegal drug production and trafficking. For instance, what could be the reaction of Taliban after a complete withdrawal of the US forces to drug trafficking? It's important because most income of the regular Afghan families come from this. So if they try to, apply the same rules they had before September 11th, I think there will be an internal, competition to have either a leverage to sustain this drug trafficking or stop it. On the other hand, there are some formerly, known as warlords, but power brokers at the provincial level. So their reactions to Taliban presence in their region is really important. Mm-hmm. Are they going to fight against Taliban or just obey the rules? So these internal dynamics does have ambiguity right now. What I believe is that the worst case scenario is a civil war in Afghanistan. I do not want to see it because it will have a burden on the civilian population, as we had witnessed right after the Soviet occupation.
Mm-hmm. No one wants Afghanistan to descend into a civil war, I'm sure, Zalmai, because it could have some ramifications on regional countries like Russia, Iran, China, and India. So who would be worried more?
Exactly. There at the moment I see two possible scenarios. The scenario of peaceful settlement of the conflict in Afghanistan between the Taliban and the government, as well as those who are factions that feeling that they are not properly represented by the current government. Mm-hmm. So a consensus, basically an internal consensus, and then negotiated settlement. But also the other, alternative scenario, which is probable, as Murat said, is Taliban's insistence on military solution. If that happens, then a lot of people will raise, and basically you already see the militia or standing against the Taliban in different provinces, and that could lead to full civil war, which is not only devastating for the people of Afghanistan, but also, as you rightly mentioned, to the people of the region as well.
Who will help negotiate a settlement is a question mark. But Iran, Murat, has recently hosted an intra-Afghan talks with representatives from government and a Taliban delegation. What's your take on that? What's at stake for Iran? And do you believe that Iran could mediate between the two?
Well, Iran was concerned with the security of Iran because the United States was in Afghanistan not only to defeat Al-Qaeda, but also to counter Iranian threat that's perceived in their minds. Mm-hmm. So after the withdrawal, I think Iran will be more active in Afghanistan, mainly through the Hazaras, because they are Shia. In the meantime, Taliban had, executed many Hazaras prior to their, takeover of the regime. And there's a reaction among them to resist Taliban. So Iran will be in a position to support Hazaras either to protect them or attack Taliban. We will see that, but Iran will be really a more active and involved state in Afghanistan.
Yes. So another concerned country, Zalmai, I think, is China. What kind of risks does this withdrawal face China in terms of its Belt and Road Initiative and its border security with Afghanistan?
The Chinese have been a lot worried about the Uyghur population of China in Xinjiang and the Afghanistan's how Afghanistan can have an adverse influence on the population of the Chinese. Also, in terms of the regional connectivity, China since 2015 and 2016 has been keen to extend this CPEC, basically part of the Belt and Road Initiative, which is in Pakistan, to extend it to Afghanistan. And they might be more keen to push it forward with the authorities in Afghanistan. And they are a country that might really kind of push for a political settlement, as I said, out of those two options that I mentioned, the political settlement to realize the CPEC and the Belt and Road Initiative and make Afghanistan part of it as well.
All right. Well, gentlemen, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining us on Straight Talk.